The old TV in Clara's apartment had been there when she moved in. It was a bulky, outdated thing. Its screen perpetually flickering with static no matter how many times she unplugged it. She'd meant to throw it out, but something about it kept her from doing so. Maybe it was the way the static seemed to shift, almost like it was alive. One night, Clara woke to the sound of the TV turning on by itself. The static filled the room, its low hum vibrating in her bones. She sat up, her heart pounding, and reached for the remote. But when she pointed it at the TV, nothing happened. The static grew louder, more intense, until it felt like the room was vibrating. Then she saw him. A figure began to emerge from the static. His outline faint at first but growing clearer with every passing second. He was tall and thin, his body made of shifting black and white pixels. His face was blank, featureless except for two dark voids where his eyes should have been. Clara froze, her breath caught in her throat. As the figure stepped out of the TV and into her room, the static man tilted his head, his movements jerky and unnatural, like a glitching video. He took a step toward her, the static hum growing louder, filling her ears until it was all she could hear. Clara tried to scream, but no sound came out. She tried to move, but her body was paralyzed, as if the static had rooted her to the spot. The static man reached out, his hand hovering inches from her face. The air around him crackled with electricity, and Clara felt a cold, numbing sensation spread through her body. Just as his fingers brushed her skin, the TV turned off, plunging the room into silence and darkness. Clara gasped, finally able to move. She scrambled out of bed and turned on the lights, but the room was empty. The TV was silent, its screen dark. She unplugged it, her hands shaking, and shoved it into the closet, locking the door behind her. For weeks, nothing happened. Clara almost convinced herself it had been a nightmare. But then, one night, she heard it again, the low hum of static coming from the closet. She tried to ignore it, pulling the blankets over her head, but the sound grew louder, more insistent. The closet door creaked open, and the static filled the room once more. Clara watched in horror as the static man stepped out, his pixelated form glitching and shifting. This time, he didn't hesitate. He moved toward her, his hand outstretched, the static hum drowning out her screams. When her roommate came home the next morning, Clara was gone. The TV was back in its place, the screen flickering with static. And if you looked closely, you could see her face in the static, her eyes wide with terror, her mouth open in a silent scream. The static man was still there too, his featureless face turned toward the screen, waiting for the next person to watch.